Seriously. How's that feeling? So ideally we would go to like a 0, but in this setting, we may come back to that later in the day, we'll see. And before we're done, we may kind of revisit that and see if that shifted any more. Because sometimes what will happen, and this is the cool thing about if you have a regular client, you can work on them and do some of this stuff, and the next time you see them, you can even go deeper. So you're continually going deeper, 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 not just maintenancing. Okay, we're going to be fixing the same problem today that we fixed 2 weeks ago, you know what I mean? So you continually go deeper, because usually there might be something underneath that. I mean, to me, we just kind of scratched the surface with this, but we went, you know, from her emotional energy flow, we went pretty deep, because that emotional movement, change happens. And a much more permanent change happens with emotional movement than just physical movement. Okay? All right?
Yeah.
Good. All righty. Anybody else got something going on? Back, chest, abs. Or you know of somebody, we can play with that too.
I do.
Okay, what's going on?
Well, Ashley and I were talking about this last week, but hers sounds different than mine. Ever since I've come from
So you gotta listen to everything. You gotta listen to everything, right? She's already given us like lots of information. She said, when I came to Wichita Falls, this pain started. I wonder what that means.
It's weird because I've lived here twice, and this was the first time. Right here. No, I take that back. I remember it started before that. But anyway, it got worse.
Left side. So we got left side.
Yeah. And I get, it's almost like a Charlie horse. It feels like a Charlie horse.
Okay.
The Charlie horse is, in my experience, it's more of a broader muscle spasm.
Oh, like is that kind of all over instead of like pinpoint?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Like if I had a Charlie horse in
It grabs
my
the whole.
leg or my foot, I can feel the muscle tightening up.
Okay.
But this is more like just a stabbing pain.
Okay.
And it does happen when I bend over.
Okay. Bend over.
But not just when I bend over.
Okay. When else besides when does it bend? But almost always it happens when you bend over.
Not always.
Okay.
But quite often.
Quite often. Good.
And it's interesting because there will be periods of time where it doesn't happen at all, and then there'll be other times that I don't really have any sense of why that
Not
is.
okay.
But I'm real tired of it because it hurts.
Right. So it's a pretty powerful pain then.
Yes.
So when it hits you, what's the 0 to 10? What would you say it is?
9.
9. Okay.
Well,
And you said it happens not only when.
part of that 9 is just, it's extremely, I mean,
Okay.
it's not like you can focus on something else when it's happening.
Okay. So that's a really strong pain. And you said it happens not only when you bend over, but when else?
I don't know how to describe it. It's just an unpredictable movement that, you know, okay, that movement created it, but it seems to initiate it, but it's,
So basically there's other movements.
it's
So
like right under the, whatever, there is a tendon that's there to the touch. Though.
okay. So where is she touching?
The bone, my rib cage. The bottom
Over
of
her
the
rib cage, right?
Is where I'm pushing, but I feel it in the tissue right below.
Okay. So she says she feels it over the rib cage and the tissue below.
Is it in the front or more to the side of the left?
But from where you're pointing, it's almost directly below the breast, right?
It's a little lower, but well, yeah.
I mean, to me, if I'm gonna look at you.
Here's my bone, the bone of my rib cage.
Okay.
It hurts most right below it.
Okay, so it's really over, basically, let me get to my muscle chart here.
Like the liver.
That's a very good point. Donna's jumping the gun in a good way. I'm not saying that's bad. So she's saying it's right over that rib cage, right? And what muscles do we have in that area?
Abdominals?
We have the abdominals that go right over there. There may also be, there's intercostal muscles that are lung related. There may be some aspect to that. And there also could be some diaphragm tie-in because bending over can sometimes contract the diaphragm. So those alone kind of point to lung issue. Now, Donna brought in a point that can sometimes get a little confusing because we have meridian points, right? And the liver point, the ending of the liver meridian is also where she's pointing, even though there's not really a liver muscle there. Does that make sense? So see, the cool thing about the body, which just proves that we're kind of in a hologram, you know about reflexology? Okay, do you know what a hologram is? A hologram is like a picture, a 3D picture, and if you take a corner of that picture and you zoom into that picture, you can see the whole picture again, okay? So if I take my hand, if I cut my hand off my body, it'll reflect my entire body problems. My eyes, iridology does the same thing. My feet, so theoretically you could take one cell out of my body and you've got an entire replication of my entire body, okay? That's like a hologram. So within a hologram, there's these multiple layered maps. So my whole hand is reflexology, and it means different things like sinuses, brain, but each different finger also has another meaning. This is my large intestine, this is my pericardium, and on and on. And then each one of those, the middle finger is your God-given strengths and help. It's multi-layered. So all I'm trying to say is that one area that Marcia pointed to, since like Donna said about the liver, it could be a liver point issue, it could be a small intestine issue, it could be a lung issue just because of the different makeup, right? Okay, so let's play with that a little bit. So,
are you saying it could be a meridian issue or a muscle issue?
Well, all muscle issues are meridian issues.
I know, but it could be the muscle.
Or the meridian, yes.
Or
yeah.
The muscle on the meridian point.
Exactly, yeah. Uh-huh. So it could be the muscle tissue is reflecting something that's happening with the meridian, which is really, if I use my language, is all of it's reflecting what's going on in the mind and emotions, okay? So it could be the muscle that's doing that reflection, or it could be the meridian point that ends there. And that can get really confusing just because there's lots of different meridian points where if I put my hand here, I've got like 6 different points of 3 different meridians right below my hand, right? So, not to mention, I've also got the spleen muscle and the liver muscle right there too. So some of it's a little bit of a dancing intuitive game. That's why the feminine side, we learn this stuff, we stick it in our left brain filing cabinet, but then we let our feminine side pull it out. And that's the dancing part. So, so from there, where do we want to go? We already got that it's left side, so what does left side relate to? Feminine. And that could be what feminine? Hers or a feminine figure, right? Okay. So is there any issue going on with somebody else, feminine, Marcia?
Well, if this has been going on since I was, I'm guessing in my 40s, but I remember going to an osteopath. It's kind of funny now because he told me that it's just pinched tissue.
Right, and it could be. I mean, seriously. I mean, the physical manifestation is real. It's not like we go, oh, it's on your mind and give it up. I'm saying that, but I'm not going to treat it like you're crazy because you're not crazy. You get what I'm saying? There's a slight difference there. The physical issue is a real physical issue.
Right.
But yeah, it came from the mind, but it isn't in your mind. That's a very slight deviation, okay? It came from the mind, but it's not in your mind.
What I was thinking when I was telling you that, though, is that it started way back then, so if it's a feminine issue, it had to have been going on then.
Very good point.
And so I'm not really relating to any particular person now.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean there isn't.
Yeah, and Marcia brought up a good point. She said when this initially started happening, which was 40 years ago, she wasn't aware of anybody at the time. But there's a funny thing with our mind and consciousness, and sometimes if we had an issue, like say with our mother that wasn't resolved and that person passed away or you're not communicating, there may be another feminine figure that shows up to echo that for you. So why I ask that is usually if it's related to somebody else, that feminine figure will still be in your life even though it's related to an old issue. Does that make sense? It may just be a different face. It's like you've seen this, I know you've seen this because we've all done it to some degree, and we know a friend that does it. Like they're in a relationship and they break up for a particular reason, and the next thing you know they're in a relationship with the same personality, just a different face, right? Because we repeat our patterns over and over until we clear them, right? So let's start with that and see where we can go. We can go small intestine, lung, or liver.
John, you know where you said that even though it's in the physical, that's not where it starts.
Right.
But you can't dismiss the physical.
Right.
It's like what I tell my patients is that once it gets to the physical, you've got to deal with it on that level.
Exactly.
But since you're putting in the spiritual, mental, emotional part of it, we're not just going to deal with it at that level.
No, and this is my hypothesis, and I can't prove this, and I really haven't read it anywhere. It's just something that's came to me from my trippy mind, is that birth defects are an ancestral issue that cannot be released on the mental emotional, and it had to be birthed in the physical in a way that could not be ignored. Just like sometimes our physical issues show up in our life because you can't fucking ignore it anymore. You've got it. It's time to deal with it. Does that make sense? So sometimes a birth defect, what we appears to be a birth defect, is that person you could say it in lots of different ways. You could say that person volunteered, that soul volunteered to manifest that in a physical way that the whole family had to pay attention to it. You get what I'm saying? Okay? And I totally believe it still goes back to mind and emotion that way, though, right? It was just never cleared out of the system. Because when you get your DNA from your parents, it's not just about how the physical body's made up, it's a lot about your mental emotional makeup too. Epigenetics. Epigenetics is a mental or emotional habit long enough rewrites DNA, period. That's a powerful fucking statement. Epigenetics is proving now that when you have a physical, mental, or emotional habit long enough, you rewrite how your DNA works. Okay? That's powerful. So, you know, but it makes sense. It explains how, if we all kind of started from the same genetics, how there's such a huge variation, a deviation in different things, right? You could say your ancestry up to 500 years ago, there was no high blood pressure until maybe a uncle or a great-great-great-great-great-grandfather had a heart issue, an emotional heart issue, had a heartbreak that he could not recover from, and he began to eat excessively certain things because of the emotion driven, and that caused the physical change. That's how trippy I think. Okay, it still goes back to the mental emotional. Okay, so Marcia, why don't you come sit in the chair?